Welcome to the Voices of Manufacturing with your hosts, Brian Salee and Michael Mullenberg, where business leaders across the industry share their unique challenges and insights.
It's almost like magic because it takes the learning process sometimes from weeks down to days, sometimes hours.
We want to help people within manufacturing and make them excited to come to work every day and go home safe to their family.
When you bring people in, they're anything but a machine. They're partners that can help you build your business, that can be your success if you treat them right.
And then you start having employees saying, when are you doing my machine? When are you going to come over here to my department? And now you get this buy-in.
This podcast is brought to you by Dazuki, the premier frontline digital transformation solution that allows manufacturers to standardize operations.
We've got a unique guest today. The manufacturing industry is going through what has been described as a manufacturing renaissance. We've got reshoring, Industry 4.0, and a variety of challenges that are leading to some significant changes in the industry. And with everything that's going on, it begs the question, what role should local, state, and federal government play in supporting U.S. manufacturing? And today our guest is going to be able to speak to that. I'd like to welcome Paul Lavoie to the show. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks very much, Brian. And hello, Michael. How are you?
And welcome, Paul.
Well, Paul, you have, Michael and I have followed you on LinkedIn, and we've been seeing all the great posts of you visiting manufacturers in the state of Connecticut. Do you mind sharing with the audience a little bit about your background and your current role?
Sure. So my background is in manufacturing and worked for a company called Carey Manufacturing, which is a catalog manufacturer of latches, catches, and handles. So latch onto us, we can handle it, was our tagline. And, a kind of a unique business. And we had 900,000 products in our catalog. We shipped 60% out of stock, and our average order size was about $1,000. So it was a very kind of high volume, low size order, high volume, but a manufacturing operation that kind of had to manufacture to be in stock in order to be competitive. And so a big claim to fame at Carey Manufacturing was in 2001, we had sent one of our catalogs to China to be manufactured. And in 2016, we started investing on restoring that product line back to Connecticut. And so we, at 2020, where are we now? 2022. So early 2022, we were probably about 85% of that entire product line was now being made here in Connecticut. And the other 15% will probably be obsoleted because they're parts that just didn't have a high enough volume to justify. But so it took us a 5-year period to reshore, a $5 million investment. And boy, we couldn't have hit the market any better at Carey Manufacturing than we did, making sure that everything was reshored when all the supply chain issues had happened. So in February of 2022, I was appointed by Governor Ned Lamont to be the chief manufacturing officer for the state of Connecticut. The criteria for being the chief manufacturing officer is that you had to have run a manufacturing business in the state. They wanted somebody that had familiar with, as I always say, they wanted somebody who would wake up Tuesday morning and go, okay, so are we going to make payroll this week? Somebody that could empathize certainly with the manufacturing ecosystem that we have here in Connecticut. So I've been serving in that role since February of 2022 and no longer associated with Carey Manufacturing as we did 5 promotions. One of my job was to implement a succession plan. We did that, did 5 promotions, and they're didn't need to replace me and are having record sales and having a great time over there. So mission well accomplished at Carey, and I get to move on to this exciting role as chief manufacturing.
It's an incredible background. I think Michael and I right now probably have a lot of questions to ask you. I do want to go back to Carey. I'm curious why you guys set up shop in China in the first place, and then what triggered you to reshore, because you guys were ahead of the curve on reshoring.
So it was a really, in 2001, it was a race to the bottom. It really was, we're in a commodity business. There's nothing sexy at Carey about, catches, latches, and handles. And there's a lot of the competition was Chinese competition. That competition is subsidized. As we know, Chinese manufacturing subsidized with electricity and cheap labor and all of that. And we just couldn't compete. Either we were going to move manufacturing to China and distribute our own products and compete that way, or just get out of that business. And considering that was the whole business, that really wasn't an option. We had done some acquisitions after that helped leverage the business a little bit later in like 2012 and 2013. But it really was around that, we just couldn't compete. And, it took 15 years for technology to kind of catch up. The story is Jack Carey, who's the owner of Carey Manufacturing, went to one of our engineers and said, I heard about this company called Trump. They got some machines. I'm thinking about doing this. Can you get the sales rep in to, show us some of the machines? And the sales rep happened to be in the area and came over that afternoon and stopped in and then started just showing some of their capabilities that allowed us to really automate a lot of the manufacturing processes using some of their laser punch presses and some press brakes and some things like that. So as Jack says, it's boring distributing your own products that are being made in China. It's much more exciting to manufacture things. So he had figured out a way that with using Trump equipment and standing up a manufacturing operation from scratch, that we could do it in a cost-effective manner. So we started on that journey. We pretty much made every mistake in the book as we were doing that. But having the ability to manufacture locally allowed us to correct those mistakes quickly and to really learn from that. So I always tell anybody, if you're going to reshore anything, call Carey Manufacturing, spend 15 minutes with them, and they'll tell you all the mistakes they made that you can avoid, because we didn't have anybody that really could help and support us. So it was a 5-year journey. It was a big investment on capital equipment. There were times where we thought we were the craziest people on the planet, but never once wavered on the plan of bringing work back here to Connecticut.
Paul, it also sounds like there was a technology play there. Some of the technology probably wasn't even available in 2001.
It wasn't. You're absolutely right. It was Jack Carey saying, wait a minute, this technology is game changer technology that's going to allow me to manufacture here now.
We're seeing a lot of that right now. And I'm sure Connecticut, you're seeing a lot of that in your role now, where the technology didn't exist before to manufacture in the US because you just couldn't do it efficiently enough and at the level you could do it in China. But the challenge we keep seeing, though, is that the skills of the workforce just aren't there. And you just don't even have workers that want to get into this type of field. They don't know what's possible yet. That's another big challenge that I think we'll get into later in this conversation. I know you have a lot of experience there. I want to pick your brain there, but I want to go back to your role now. You're the chief manufacturing officer for the state of Connecticut. You're extremely unique. You're the only state in the country, right, that has a chief manufacturing officer?
That's correct. Absolutely.
What led to the creation of this role? Why did the state of Connecticut say, hey, we need someone to interface with manufacturers in our state?
Sure. So let me give you a little bit about the manufacturing ecosystem in Connecticut. So Connecticut, small state, right? Third smallest state. We're 5,445 square miles. We have 4,400 manufacturers within that space. And there's 160,000 people that work in those 4,400 manufacturers. So that puts your average manufacturer somewhere around 38 people. But when you consider that, that 60,000 of those people work in the top 25, right? The Sikorsky's, Electric Boat, Pratt and Whitney, Collins Aerospace, Medtronic, ASML, some of our large manufacturers here. And that's 100,000 people working in 4,375 manufacturers. It put the average manufacturer is around 20 people, and they're all critical supply chain manufacturers to national security, national safety, freedom. Aerospace Alley runs through Connecticut, and you can't fly without Connecticut. There is a Connecticut component on anything that leaves the ground. When you look at that dispersed ecosystem, there is no aggregate voice for manufacturing. So you have 4,300 manufacturers that average 20 people or less that just basically are out there going, what are we doing? We don't know what we're doing. So they all banded together. The first thing that they did is there's 9 manufacturing associations in the state, and they all came together what's called the Connecticut Manufacturing Collaborative. So they all joined forces and said, let's unify our voices to have a more powerful voice for manufacturing in the state. So those 9 organizations got together, and one of the things that they lobbied was for the chief manufacturing officer. They said, we need somebody at the highest level of government that works for the governor that will put a focus on manufacturing, because we know that manufacturing will be a growth engine for the economy in Connecticut. We know the multipliers of jobs it creates. We know the multiplier effect on the economy, and we need to have a voice for smaller manufacturers. So in 2018, in the legislative session, the legislature, and then signed by the governor, created legislation creating this job. I serve at the pleasure of the governor, so I'm appointed by the governor. And the first person to take this job was Colin Cooper. Colin was retiring from the Whitcraft Group and made a 2-year commitment to the governor to be the first chief manufacturing officer. He started in October of 2019. So basically, Colin's 2-year term was keeping manufacturing afloat during the pandemic. He really spent most of his time either helping manufacturers flip to PPP and other safety issues, or just keeping manufacturing open. So manufacturing in Connecticut never closed. It was considered an essential business, and we never closed manufacturing. So when Colin retired, I had come into the picture in February of 2022. So I'm post-pandemic and really get an opportunity to think strategically and to really help to support manufacturing. We have a great support ecosystem, but also be able to think 25 years out as to where the manufacturing ecosystem is going to be, and to be able to put plans in place to make sure that Connecticut used to be a national leader in manufacturing in the States.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that the small manufacturers got together, collaborated, and then said, hey, we need this support. And I mean, that's representative of the entire US. And most, 90 something percent of manufacturing in the US are less than 100 employees. You probably know the stat better than I do, but somewhere around there, right?
I would probably say less than 50 employees. I think,
Yeah.
100, I always tell people, they say, well, we're small, we have 30 people. I go, no, actually, you're bigger than average.
I was going to say, we have a similar organization here of manufacturers that have come together over many years here in Minnesota, but it doesn't have a direct phone line to the governor. So we applaud you for that. Brian and I have said, you've got the coolest job we've ever heard of in manufacturing. But, what kind of activities are part of that conglomerate? And, just to give us a description of kind of what things are they working on? What opportunities are there for these manufacturers now that you have this position?
Sure. So first and foremost, I'm the board chair of the Manufacturing Innovation Fund. And the Manufacturing Innovation Fund was created in 2015 by the legislature to invest in manufacturing in the state. And we have a multitude of programs that I have an 11-person board that I'm the board chair of, that's made up of generally manufacturers and people in the manufacturing community. Pratt & Whitney, for example, has a seat on the board. And then I have a manufacturer who has 3 employees that has a seat on the board. So we have the entire kind of ecosystem covered on that board. And we have some programs. We have a manufacturing voucher program, which provides manufacturers with 100 employees or less with up to $100,000 in grant money for the purchase of new equipment, or to continue to move their business forward. So if they wanted to have their CMMC, cybersecurity certification, they can use the money for that. If they want to buy new software, if they want to buy new equipment, it's a matching grant program. So it's basically a 2-for-1 match. So they'll get 33% and the state will pay 33%, and they get 67% up to $100,000. We have incumbent worker training dollars. So we'll pay 50 cents on the dollar for all incumbent worker training, up to $50,000 a year for a manufacturer, up to $100,000 lifetime. We have an apprenticeship program where we fund apprenticeships. We fund internships. We will do cybersecurity assessments. We have a advertising campaign around manufacturing careers. We call it our Hearts and Minds advertising campaign. We do career road shows with the Manufacturing Innovation Fund. We have an ambassador program. We have a database program that we're launching to connect. It's part of our supply chain resiliency. So to make sure that we're connecting manufacturers together. So we use that fund to invest in the growth of manufacturing. So that's a big part of my job is that fund and the programs around there. And then I'm the manufacturing concierge. I am the voice of the manufacturers. The way I've worked in the private sector my entire career. This is my first public sector job, and I've run businesses, and I am customer focused and customer driven. So people say to me, I say, manufacturers are my customer. So I spend a great deal of my time visiting my customers. In my first 10 months on the job, I visited over 130 customers, right? And did tours of 130 manufacturing operations. And I want to promote manufacturing. So I'm on LinkedIn and social media promoting what we do here in Connecticut for manufacturing and what great products that we're making and the people that make them. So part of my job is just going out. And when I do that, I created I have a marketing background too. So I created a tour. I call it the Lean In, Listen, Learn, and Link Tour. And so I go out and I lean in, I listen to manufacturers, I learn about their operation, and I link them to the resources that they need to be successful. So we call it the L4 tour now. So, where's Paul going on the L4 tour this week? But when I meet with manufacturers, it's just to highlight their business, but more importantly, to let them know that I'm here, I'm here to support you. And here's all the other resources that the state has to support your manufacturing business. So we want you to be successful. We want you to grow, and we're going to give you the resources to be able to support your business and grow your business. And then all the associations often ask me to speak about manufacturing. I'm working on the manufacturing strategic plan for the state, and then we're implementing that plan. So, we're thinking, especially aerospace is a very big part of Connecticut manufacturing. 25% of all aircraft engine parts that are used in the U.S. are manufactured in Connecticut. So a quarter of everything that's in an airplane engine is made here in Connecticut. And so we're working very hard to make sure that we protect that strategic advantage for Connecticut and Aerospace Alley. And we're looking at things like digital transformation and model-based definition. We're looking at, again, we talked about cybersecurity, maturity model certification, and locking down the defense supply chain. Talk about model-based definition and digital transformation. But then we're also talking about additive manufacturing and how additive is going to play a role in aerospace. And then what we're also talking about too is hydrogen fuel and, sustainable aviation fuel. And what does that do to the engine industry? How does that change engines? As engines are getting smaller and more powerful, now we have a different fuel source. So that takes Connecticut manufacturing ecosystem in aerospace specifically from today to 2050. And those are things that I need to be thinking about how we're going to support today. And then we start to take a look at shipbuilding, because we build half of the Navy's budget is submarine, and we're the submarine capital of the world in Connecticut. So I need to think about shipbuilding, and then medical products and food manufacturing, it's all these. And so I try not to think of it in verticals as much as I think of it as how I can transform the entire ecosystem. But sometimes some of those things are driven by some of those verticals, and then I apply it across the ecosystem. So digital transformation is for every Connecticut manufacturer, but it's going to get birthed in the defense supply chain because it's a DoD imperative. So I'm going to launch it there, and then I'm going to spread it out to the whole supply chain. So we're working on that. And so those are our 4 initiatives. And then we also have offshore wind coming into the state as well. And so we have a heavy lift pier in Connecticut. So Connecticut's going to be the hub for offshore wind on the East Coast, especially in the Northeast and around the projects in the Northeast. So we're looking at how we're standing up an entire ecosystem around offshore wind. So between the Innovation Fund and visiting and helping manufacturers and speaking engagements and offshore wind and all of those other initiatives that I talked about with digital transformation and additive manufacturing and hydrogen fuel and all of that, it's a full plate.
Paul, I'm curious, spending a lot of time with all of these manufacturers in the state of Connecticut across a variety of industries, different size companies. They're all, I imagine, experiencing a lot of similar challenges, but also probably a lot of unique challenges based on the size of the company and the industry vertical that they're in. How are you taking what you're learning from these companies and feeding that information back to the state legislator so you can develop programs to support manufacturing?
That's a great question, Brian. So one of the things in going out and visiting with manufacturers and understanding it really has come pretty clear that there's 3 separate issues. One is around workforce development. The other is around supply chain. We need to shorten supply chains and make the access to products they need within the supply chain more accessible. And then we need to accelerate the adoption of innovation and technology. So in the workforce area, what we've done is we've certainly identified the problem, and we spend a lot of time describing the problem, but we spend a lot of time describing the solution. So we really have 4 solutions that we look at around workforce development. And the first is changing the hearts and minds about manufacturing. So the perception of manufacturing is really, the reality of manufacturing is very different than the perception of manufacturing. Perception is dark, dirty, and dangerous. And we all know that manufacturing is not that. It's advanced, it's clean, it's a environment where you need to be smart and you need to be thoughtful and you need to be skilled to be able to work in that environment. So we're trying to get that message back out to kids as young as grade school and middle school kids to get them excited about careers in manufacturing. We also look at labor participation rate, how we get people back into the labor force. We also have a program where we're connecting interns. We're connecting 4-year university students with manufacturers, and we're funding interns. So the state of Connecticut is funding an internship at a manufacturer for, we'll fund up to $3,500 per intern we'll fund up to 2 for every manufacturer. I've met personally with every dean of every manufacturing school in the state, and we're building this bridge between these manufacturing schools and all of our manufacturers to make sure that if you learn in Connecticut, I want you to earn in Connecticut.
Yeah.
So I want you to stay here and stay home. And then we're spending a lot of time investing in communities to make affordable housing and to make it affordable and fun for young people to live here and to stay here. Connecticut is a great state if you're married and you have 2 kids. We have one of the best education systems in the country, one of the best healthcare systems in the country, one of the best quality of life from the beach to the mountains to Boston, New York, and all of that. But it's that 22 to 29-year-old that we need to keep here. And we're investing in our communities and making our communities much more livable. So kids will say, hey, Connecticut's cool. We want to stay here. And we can continue to grow a workforce around that.
Paul, I want to go back because I'm really interested. You mentioned changing the perception, right? That's one of the biggest struggles that we face in the industry is the dirty, dark, and dangerous perception of manufacturing, and that there are no good jobs in manufacturing. There's no future in manufacturing. How are you guys going about changing that perception? What are you guys doing? Are you running like ad campaigns, commercials? Like what are some of the practical things the state is doing?
Yeah. So we've launched a Hearts and Minds advertising campaign. It's all around highlighting manufacturers here in the state. So that the theme of it is made here by me. So we're focusing on all of the really cool things that we make in Connecticut and the people who make them. And we're telling stories about, 18-year-old kids that coming out of high school that are now 24 years old and supervisors, and they own their own house and they have a nice car, and, and how their perception of manufacturing changed when they got into it. So we're doing it through storytelling. We're doing it on social. We need to reach young people where they are. So, we're doing that, but we also need to reach parents, and we need to reach guidance counselors and other influencers around career choices. So I've long said, as long as I'm the chief manufacturing officer, there will be a marketing campaign about manufacturing in the state of Connecticut and funded on an annual basis. And it's really all designed around changing that perception. The other thing we've done with that campaign is I've been in a lot of meetings with a lot of manufacturers who have made inaccurate statements about manufacturing in the state. And the reason why they've made it is it's been their perception of manufacturing or been an isolated experience. So I'm in the process right now of creating a manufacturing ambassadors program. And that the only requirement is you have to be passionate about manufacturing. And then each month I'm going to do a webinar around a certain subject and topic. And then each week I'm going to do a short video about what I learned this week in manufacturing in Connecticut. And the idea is to educate anybody in manufacturing or really about what we do. So when somebody says, manufacturers are leaving Connecticut, we can sit there and say, well, I was just on a call with the chief manufacturing officer, and he told me that we've seen a 5% increase in manufacturers coming back into the state, or we just had these 3 manufacturers come in, or manufacturing is growing by this percent. So it really is attacking the false narratives and, quite frankly, sometimes the gaslighting that people do around manufacturing. And I'm going to do that with facts, and I'm going to have an army of ambassadors out there that will be identifiable in group meetings by a button or a t-shirt or something, that when somebody says something false about manufacturing, they're going to say, oh, no, that's not true. That's not true. This is really what's the fact that we make, 1/4 of all aircraft engine parts are made in Connecticut. Nobody in Connecticut knows that. The people who run aerospace companies didn't know that till I started telling. And then when they're at a dinner party and somebody says, oh, well, my kid wants to work in manufacturing. I don't want him to have a career in manufacturing. That's dark, dirty, and dangerous. They go, oh, no, don't. You can make $100,000 a year in manufacturing. Did you know we make this? Did we make that? We make that. So I'm going to do it one person at a time. And I'm just going to, I just want to make sure that we get the word out about manufacturing through marketing and through this army of ambassadors that'll just be talking good news about manufacturing here in the state.
I just heard a company out in Salt Lake, Tanner, is doing shop floor walkarounds just with a video camera, just to show like a day in the life. And they're getting all kinds of traction and feedback on that. They've already got a pretty good manufacturing reputation, but they said, we're not letting up. So I applaud you for that. It sounds like a great approach. During that conversation or that thing that you just spoke, what I heard was beaches and mountains, though.
Yeah.
Sounds like a great place. You got that going for you as well.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, absolutely. You can be, well, you can't do it in the same season like you can in California. You can't go to the beach and then go skiing in the mountain like you can in California. Our mountains aren't that high. We're the state for everybody who loves 4 seasons.
I know it's probably early on in your tenure and your efforts here, but I mean, do you have an example of a 25-year-old that's been impacted by, the funding, the internships, the marketing campaign?
We have a program is run by, we have an organization in Connecticut called the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology. It's called CCAT for short. And they're our technology hub. So I support them with funds from the Manufacturing Innovation Fund around technology and advancing technology. They've created, with a grant from Stanley Black and Decker, what's called the Maker Multiplier program. And the Maker Multiplier is basically taking those people, taking those stories, taking those 25-year-olds that at age 18 were struggling and were unsure what they wanted for a career, and they found manufacturing and they started in that career, and now they're 25 years old and they're production supervisors and they're making $85,000 a year and they own their own home. And so we have a bunch of those that are out telling these other stories. But we have a steel company here in Connecticut tell the story of a young boy named Lewis, who's exactly that. He was 18 years old, didn't know what he wanted to do, stumbled into the steel company. They're like, "Oh, sure, we'll give you a job." They really liked him. So they sent him to Georgia for training because they're a national company. They sent him to Georgia for training. They invested in his training. He learned a lot. It was work-based training. So for him, it fit his lifestyle. Again, he's 22 years old. He's a production supervisor. He drives a Ford Mustang. He owns his own home. The kids that he went to high school with that made fun of him because he was less than are now coming out of a 4-year university with, 5 to 6 thousand figures of debt. And so those are the kinds of stories where you sit there and say, listen, we're not telling you college is not important, because if there's certain careers that you want, or if there's certain, levels that you want to get within your career, you need to go to college, but it's not for everybody. And you can have a very good lifestyle. You can be like Lewis, right? You can be like, I did another one. I had a 59-year-old auto mechanic that didn't want to do that anymore. He was in business with his father. I said, well, come to work for us. I mean, you've run an auto shop. I'm pretty sure you can run a production line. And here at 59 years old, we reskilled him. He was going to retire and he's having a fall. He's having the time of his life. I'm telling you, that's the Carey Manufacturing. That shop floor runs better than it's ever run, because I got a 15-year-old guy that doesn't, everything's clean. There's no oil anywhere. His hands are clean. Everything's spotless. And his name is Joe. Just be like Joe. I mean, we have all of these opportunities to reskill and upskill, but we can only do that through stories, and to be able to tell stories so people can sit there and say, I never thought of that. I never thought I could do this. And say, sure, you can. We'll provide you with the training. We'll provide you with the opportunity. Anybody can work in manufacturing if you want to.
We talked about we need to change the perception, right? Develop this workforce pipeline. You've got to change the perception first and get new people coming in. But then what about the existing people that are already in manufacturing that maybe just don't have the skills that you need? Because that's one of the biggest challenges we see right now is we just can't skill these people up quick enough to deal with the new technology that's come in. What's the state doing there?
Yeah. So we have this incredible, really incredible ecosystem in the state around that. So we have our community college system is ranked the best community college system in the country. All of them have advanced manufacturing programs. And so, and they all do skill-based certificate and badge programs as well. And then we have some 4-year universities that are doing some of those programs as well. But we support that, and it's all funded through the Manufacturing Innovation Fund through what we call incumbent worker training. So if you're a manufacturer and you want to upskill your workforce, we'll give you up to $50,000 a year, maximum lifetime of $100,000 a year to reskill and retrain your employees. And it's a 50 cent on a dollar match, right? So you spend $2, we'll give you $1, right? And so you're going to pay $1, we're going to pay $1, right? So it's a program that manufacturers dip into all the time to be able to upskill and reskill their workforce into better paying jobs and into better paying opportunities. And it's important for us to do that because as we continue to advance technology within the ecosystem in Connecticut, we have to advance the workforce ahead of the technology. Right? The workforce has to be smart enough to adopt the new technology. Right? You train the workforce first and then introduce new technology. Don't introduce new technology to an untrained workforce. Because I'm going to tell you right now, it'll be sitting in a corner with a tarp over it because nobody will know what to do with it. Right. And so,
yeah.
So our approach is workforce first, technology second. And we provide, the Manufacturing Innovation Fund provide the resources for manufacturers to upskill and reskill their workforce.
So the funding is provided, and then the community colleges is where you could send, maybe bringing in some cobots to work on a line. You could send those employees in your factory to one of the local community colleges to get skilled up on programming cobots.
Absolutely. Then go to community colleges. We have a 4-year university that has a mobile trailer that will come to you to do training. They'll park it right in your parking lot, and then you just have people walk from the shop floor out into the trailer. And again, they go out and get federal dollars for incumbent worker training. So we've got all the way from solutions to mobile trailers that will drop in manufacturers to any company that, the only requirement we have with incumbent worker training is it has to be done by an outside resource. So it could be anybody. You could go get sales training for your sales staff. You could get, you want, again, we were doing all kinds of basic math. We would hire a bunch of high school kids, and then we would bring the mobile trailer out, and then we would do metrology, and we would do, some basic math training, and we do some quality training and things like that. And we do them in 4-hour increments so that we still get 4 hours of production. But the trailer would sit there for like a week, and we would just cycle people through. It was discounted at 50% for all of our training. So it just made a ton of sense to be able to do that. But that's how the state of Connecticut supports that, those training initiatives and continues to support the manufacturing ecosystem.
Yeah. And I want to just emphasize that because you full solution, the funding plus one of the biggest struggles most companies have is we need to upskill this workforce. They have no idea how to upskill the workforce. They can't do it. They're not great training organizations themselves, and they don't have any local resources to do the training. And so that seems like the other gap that you guys have helped fill, which is amazing.
Well, and a big part of my job is connecting the education system to industry.
Yeah.
I mean, I will, any manufacturer that says to me, well, the school system, the education system isn't producing the kind of workers that we need. My immediate reaction to them is, well, have you told them that? Have you engaged with your community college? Have you engaged with your technical high school? Have you told them what you need? Well, no. Well, how are they going to deliver what you need if you haven't told them what you need? If they're not doing the right thing, have you told them that? Well, no. Well, what if you weren't making the part that your customer wanted? You think your customer would tell you? Well, yeah. Well, then don't you think maybe, you're the customer. Don't you think maybe you could tell the supplier of, and their light bulbs go off on their head. And so I'm getting industry manufacturers to sit down with people who are writing curriculum to sit there and say, no, don't do that. We don't need that anymore. Don't trade. Well, this is what we need. We need this over here. And we need this, and to start, I'm here at the University of Connecticut today. And I said to the manufacturers that were here, I want you to think of the skills you need today, but I want to think you to think of the skills you need 8 years from now. Because a kid who's a freshman in high school decides he wants to be an engineer. It's going to take us 8 years to produce that product. And what we're doing today, I'm going to bet you any money that if I come to your business 8 years from now, you're going to be doing a lot of different stuff. And you need to start thinking about what that's going to be. And you can see the industry light bulb popping, right? And then you can see the people that work in education going, oh my God, what are we solving for? Do we know what these needs are going to be? But we're having the conversations. We're sitting in the same room. We're having the conversations because we're not going to solve the workforce problem until we have an industry-led education system around manufacturing where the industry is telling them what they need and they're providing the programs to deliver what they need. And we're seeing people get into the workforce, get quickly up that learning curve and becoming productive employees. And a big part of my job is making sure that we're getting people in the room together.
I love hearing this, Paul, because oftentimes I hear the same complaints you probably hear is, the kids coming out of school, they're just not being taught the skills that we need. And you hear this complaint and it's like the government needs to do more to, work with schools to change the curriculum. And you're saying, hey, no, you're the manufacturer. You know what skills you need. You go directly to the school and tell them. And that's a mind shift change for a lot of these manufacturers. Everyone's a little bit too reliant on expecting a little too much from their government, local and state governments to change the curriculum in these schools. That's the mistake I think that we're seeing in a lot of areas.
Yeah. And there's too much reliance, I think, on government to think for manufacturers as well.
Yes.
And I tell them, I say, listen, as your chief manufacturing officer, I can come in and walk your shop floor. I can probably make some suggestions, but you know what? I don't know your business. I don't know what you make. I don't know the intricacies of it. I haven't spent, 30 years in it. Some of these are second or third generation businesses. How about I introduce you to all the technology that we have available, and then you go back and figure out how you're going to use that technology. And then I make it easy for you to use that technology. And you should see the look on the manufacturers when they come and they get introduced to this technology. They're like, oh my God, I'm rethinking my entire business model right now. I had no idea these resources were here. I've been struggling with this. I don't need to struggle anymore. And so I need to make people smarter, right? That's big part of my job. It's just expose them to different things to make them smarter so they can improve their own business. It's to enable them, to give them the tools they need to enable them to improve their businesses, and then to be able to support them through either funding or grants or other opportunities.
I do have one question, maybe a little bit outside the boundaries here, but talking not about Connecticut. So what about companies that are not based in Connecticut? Are you interfacing with any of them across the nation saying, build your new factory here, expand over to our part of the world?
Absolutely. So we have a nonprofit organization in Connecticut called Advanced CT. And Advanced CT's job is to recruit businesses to Connecticut. And in Advanced CT, there is a director of advanced manufacturing. So his name's Ted Fisher. Ted and I talk to each other probably twice a day. But Ted's job is to attract new business into Connecticut. And then they also have a business retention and business expansion operation at Advanced CT. So we are very strategic and very picky about what kind of businesses that we want to attract to the state. We have a workforce problem, but we have a highly advanced workforce. We have a highly educated workforce. And so we're not looking for companies to come in, and we're land restricted, right? We're a small state. So we're talking about the Chips and Science Act, and we're like, what's our play on the Chips and Science Act? Well, it's research and development. It's really going to be around research and development. We're not building a $7 billion square foot chips factory in Connecticut. We just, you can build that in upstate New York or in Ohio or Texas or all that other stuff. So we're very strategic as to what our plays are. We had a foam, a company that injects foam into mattresses come and say they want to move to Connecticut. And we're like, no, we don't want you. You're not a good fit. You need a cheap labor force and you need a lot of it. And we're not cheap, right? We have a $15 an hour minimum wage. So we're not cheap and we don't have a lot of it. And the company was like, you don't want us in the state? And we're like, no, we don't want you here, but now if you're you want to talk about electrical vehicle charging or battery storage or clean energy or, offshore wind or any of those other things, we're looking to attract those kinds of businesses because we have a great university system. We have a highly advanced workforce. We're very, very innovative. We're very smart. And these are just technologies that are going to, kind of be game changing. And we want to be in the middle of that because of our manufacturing DNA. So we do that. We look outside to recruit businesses in, but we're very selective to make sure that they fit our profile and they really fit where we want to go from a manufacturing footprint.
Well, and Paul, I imagine that must tie to one of your other initiatives, which is strengthening the local supply chain, right? You talked about that as one of the areas of focus. So are you looking for businesses that are going to help support, obviously with aerospace being such a big chunk of the manufacturers within the state, you're trying to bring in, I would imagine, precision machining, companies like that as well?
Yeah, so absolutely. So I take offshore wind, for example, right? It's a brand new industry coming to Connecticut. We have the hub, which is the pier in New London, Connecticut. And so what we're doing is going out to the existing manufacturing base and saying, here are the opportunities for you to grow and expand your business in offshore wind. Here's what we need. Here's what we're looking for. Here's what the supply chain requirements are going to be. And then we're going to ask manufacturers to come back to us and say, okay, we think we can do this, we can do this, we can do that. That's going to give us a gap analysis. And from that gap analysis, we're going to recruit companies to come to Connecticut and say, look, we have the work, right? Because the first thing that we get from any company that's interested in Connecticut is they say, can you get us a customer? And our immediate response is, no, that's not what we do, right? We can provide you with support and all of that, but we're not your business development organization. Well, guess what? With offshore wind, there's work, right? So you want to relocate and you want to be in the offshore wind space, we'll look at that gap analysis, but we want to give Connecticut manufacturers the opportunity to grow their business first before we do the gap analysis and start attracting people in. So it's really it's a product development strategy almost, if you will, as to, you take a look at what your strengths are, what you're really good at, take a look at what your gaps are, and then how are you going to fill those gaps, right? And how are we going to fill those gaps in that supply chain? I'm on a big kick for what I call Connecticut shoring. And that is just connecting Connecticut resources together so that we do business together. The Connecticut supply chain is incredibly diverse. I was meeting with a manufacturer and they said, my entire supply chain is in 30 miles of my business. Because you know how wonderful that is to be able to go to a finishing house and then a deburring house or a, centerless grinding house, and just to take the truck and drive 30 miles and do all this other stuff. He goes, I was talking to a guy in North Dakota and I said, where do you get your finishing done? He goes, Minnesota. And he goes, a customer calls me up and they have a rush job. He goes, I just drive the truck around and go to my buddies and my supply chain and say, hey, can you rush this through? Our customer needs it. They go, sure. Yeah, I'll put it on the line tonight. Don't worry about it. That's the beauty of the Connecticut supply chain is. And so, but what I need to do is I need to do a much better job of letting everybody in Connecticut know what that supply chain is. What are the capabilities and capacity of that supply chain so that we can lean upon each other in what I call Connecticut shoring. Let's do it here in Connecticut first before we look outside our border.
Yeah. Well, Paul, it's clear to me based on this conversation today, you're really the connector, and what an important role for a state to have, because it's this promotion, this sharing of knowledge, sharing of opportunities. It seems like that's a missing gap for a lot of states. I mean, a lot of states, Connecticut's obviously a smaller state, a little bit easier to do there than somewhere like California, but still, this is a really powerful program that you guys have put in place in Connecticut.
Yeah, you can't spell Connecticut without connect.
Yep. I like that.
Yeah, you're full of little catchfrays as well.
Yeah,
It's
I
like
do.
as if your passion wasn't enough.
Right.
That's the marketing background.
I tell you can't fly without Connecticut. You can't spell Connecticut without connect. Without you learn here, what you learn here. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Paul, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's a pleasure to talk to you and learn from you.
Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to continue to amplify all the great stuff that we're doing here in the state of Connecticut. So any manufacturers, any governments out there that really want to learn about what Connecticut's doing, please feel free to reach out to me, because we're happy to share. We're Connecticut first, USA second. We want the U.S. to grow as well. And we're happy to share with what we're doing here in Connecticut.
Thanks for being such a great ambassador and for all the passion behind what you said. It was awesome. Thank you.
No, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Voices of Manufacturing podcast with Brian Salee and Michael Mullenberg. This show is brought to you by Dazuki, the premier digital transformation solution that allows manufacturers to standardize operations. Our website, where you can listen to our episodes and find tons of helpful resources, is dazuki.com. Sign up for our monthly newsletter so you'll be the first to know about new episodes. That's dazuki.com, and join us in creating the front line of the future.